Hello everyone. Today we are going to study the summary of a triumph of surgery. Really, it's a very interesting story. So let's start. The story starts when Mrs Pumphre, a wealthy woman, takes her dog Tricki out for a walk. A nearby veterinary doctor who knows the woman looks at dog. He is shocked because he sees that the dog resembles a bloated sausage with a leg on each end. He advises her to stop giving him unhealthy things to eat, but Mrs. Pumphrey is unable to convince him. Soon Mrs. Pumphrey's dog Tricki falls ill and the doctor is called. The narrator, Mr. Herriot, thinks to take the dog to the hospital. He knows that Mrs. Pumphre is unwillingly to give her dog and almost faints after hearing these words. He then takes the dog and sets up a bed for him in his surgery. The dog neither moves much nor eats anything for the first 2 days. The next day he looks around and whimpers a little. He wants to go out on the third day. When he is taken out, he starts playing with other big dogs. On the third day, Tricki gets along with his other dogs in the surgery and even licks their food bowls. Then his condition started improving very fast. He started fighting with other dogs for his food. When this news reached Mrs. Pumphrey, she started sending eggs to Tricki because she thought Tricki was recovering from an illness and needed energy food. Mr. Herriot and his friends started eating those eggs for breakfast. Then to improve Tricki's blood, Mrs. Pumphrey started sending bottles of wine, which Mr. Herriot drinks. He used to take 2 glasses before lunch and a few more glasses during lunch. Then when she started sending bottles of brandy for Tricki, Mr. Herriot thought that he would really like to have Tricki as a permanent guest at the surgery. Mr. Herriot was very happy to eat 2 extra eggs every morning for some days. Then have a few glasses of wine in the afternoon and end the day by drinking brandy at night. But when he made a right decision and called Mrs. Pumphrey because she really worried about Tricki. Thus, Tricki was ready to go back home. Tricki was very happy to see his mistress and jumped into the car. Mrs. Pumphrey said that she would never be able to thank Mr. Herriot for what he did and that his surgery was successful because Tricki was now on the mend. The moral of the story is that anything, even food, if given more than it is required, will harm the body. But if in time you come into proper routine, that problem can be solved without any surgery. One shouldn't use the resources much. Thanks for listening me.